If you want a brutally honest test of modern life, try this. Imagine the power goes out tonight and you still need to clean, cook, mend, and get on with your day. What actually works and what instantly turns into dead weight? Because that's the strange part. A lot of our smart household gear is only smart as long as the conditions are perfect, but the Victorian home was built around tools that worked in the messy middle. No sockets, no chargers, no software updates, just mechanical certainty. And in this video, I'm not going to romanticize the era, because Victorian domestic life could be exhausting, but I am going to show you 12 household tools that were genuinely clever, genuinely practical, and in a few cases, still better designed than what we buy now. Quick comment before we start. What's the last household gadget you bought that either broke, disappointed you, or ended up shoved in a drawer? Because the Victorians would recognize that feeling, and their answer was simple. If a tool can't work every day with minimal fuss, it's not a tool, it's a liability. That's why the era produced an explosion of crank hand, pedal, spring, gear, roller, and lever-driven devices designed to do one job well and do it reliably. And to keep this grounded in real history rather than vibes, here's one concrete example. In 1876, Melville Bissell received a U.S. patent for improvements in carpet sweepers, a purely mechanical way to lift dust and grit from carpets without a motor, and it became the sort of invention that spread because it solved a real, daily problem. Now, the promise of this first section is simple. By the end of this video, you won't just know the 12 tools, you'll understand the 3 principles behind why they worked so well. They multiplied human effort with clever mechanics, they reduced failure points, and they were designed to be maintained rather than replaced. And once you see those principles, you start spotting them everywhere, in how they cleaned, how they did laundry, how they prepped food, and even how they made little luxuries at home. So in a few minutes, we're starting where Victorian practicality really shows its teeth: floors, dust, and carpets. Because the first tool on the list looks almost laughably simple, until you realize it solves the exact problem modern houses still complain about every single week.
In this section, you're going to see why Victorian cleaning worked without electricity, and why it was often more effective than we assume. They didn't remove dust with suction. They moved it, trapped it, and got it out of the room with simple mechanics and ruthless routine. Quick one for the comments before we start. In your home, what wins the weekly war? Dust, crumbs, or pet hair? Because the Victorians designed tools around that exact reality, not around convenience marketing. Let's start with the quiet genius that still makes sense today: the mechanical carpet sweeper. It looks almost quaint until you understand what it's doing. A set of rotating brushes driven by your push movement, lifting grit from the pile and flicking it into a compartment, meaning the motor is your arm and the efficiency comes from the gearing and brush geometry rather than electricity. It's the kind of tool that spread because it solved a stubborn problem in carpeted homes, and it sits right in the Victorian tradition of multiplying human effort with clever mechanics, which is exactly why the Bissell carpet sweeper patent era matters here. Now, the sweeper is the star, but it was never alone. The Victorian cleaning stack was a system. First, you loosen what's stuck, then you collect what's loose, then you remove it from the living space. That's where the rug beater comes in, the blunt, honest tool that turns cleaning into a physical process. You take a rug outside, you beat it, you let gravity and airflow do the work, and you keep that filth from ever becoming indoor air. It's primitive, yes, but it's also a principle modern homes forget. You don't want to aerosolize dust and then breathe it for a week. You want it gone. Inside the house, the dustpan and brush become the unsung heroes because they don't rely on perfect seals or filters. They rely on technique. A good stiff brush corrals dirt, a properly angled pan collects it, and the key is not the object, but the habit. Sweeping little and often, so you never let grit build into something that needs a dramatic, noisy intervention. Then you add the finishing layer, hand brushes for skirting boards, corners and upholstery, plus feather dusters or cloths used in a way that lifts dust rather than smearing it. And here's the Victorian mindset that makes this all work. The goal isn't to make the house look clean for 5 minutes. The goal is to keep it from becoming dirty enough to be unmanageable. That's why these tools feel so reliable. They're not dependent on external power, and they're not fragile. They're simple, repairable, and effective at the scale of daily life. But there's a second truth, and it's what makes the next section so brutal. If you think dust was the weekly nuisance, laundry was the daily grind. Floors are a matter of minutes, clothes are hours, water, strain, and repetition. And the Victorian household tools for washing and wringing are where you'll see the most ruthless mechanical ingenuity of all in the next section. Now you're going to see the most ruthless truth about Victorian life. Cleaning the floors was a weekly nuisance, but laundry was a weekly campaign, and it's where the best non-electric tools earned their keep. Quick comment before we dive in. Are you more traumatized by washing, drying, or ironing? Because for Victorians, the answer was often all three in a row. Wash day started with heat and water, not a button, and every step was designed to wring the most work out of the least energy. The first real tool on the list is the washboard, a ridged surface in a frame built to force soapy water through fabric by friction, so you're not just soaking clothes, you're actively scrubbing dirt out of the fibers. It looks simple, but it's a mechanical multiplier. Those ridges do what your hands can't do efficiently for hours. Then comes the step that separated possible from impossible, getting the water out. Wet clothes are heavy, slow to dry, and miserable to handle, so Victorians leaned hard on wringers and mangles, 2 rollers that you feed cloth through to squeeze out water with steady pressure. A geared wringer mangle in the UK is thought to date to around the mid-19th century, and the principle is exactly what you'd want in a powerless house. Predictable force, no batteries, no waiting. You crank, the rollers bite, the water pours out, and suddenly drying becomes hours faster. And this is the moment I don't romanticize. Those rollers demanded respect. Fingers too close, fabric snagged, and you could hurt yourself. So it's brilliant engineering, but it's not a toy. After wringing, drying was a choreography of air and heat, lines outdoors when weather allowed, and indoors on clothes horses near a kitchen fire when it didn't, turning the home itself into a drying machine. And then the final boss, ironing. Before electric irons, Victorians used what were called sad irons, sad meaning solid, thick slabs of cast iron heated on a stove or near a fire, heavy enough that you weren't just smoothing fabric, you were doing a workout with every sleeve and sheet. Laundry workers often used several irons in rotation, one in the hand, one heating, one ready, swapping as they cooled so the work didn't stop. That's the Victorian pattern in its purest form, not convenience but flow, a system built around continuous motion with simple, durable tools. And once you see it, you start to feel the shift in the video. If they could mechanize something as brutal as laundry, with rollers, ridges, heat, and leverage, imagine what they did in the kitchen, where cranks and gears turn everyday prep into something fast, precise, and almost weirdly satisfying, which is exactly where we're going in the next section. In this section, you're going to meet the Victorian household's most underrated superpower, the crank hand kitchen tool, the little mechanical empire that turned slow, tiring prep into something fast, consistent, and almost impossible to break. Quick comment before we start. Are you more of a sweet person or a savory person? Because these tools were built for both, and once you see how they work, you'll understand why modern gadgets often feel flimsy by comparison. Let's begin with a tool that looks like a toy until you use one, the hand crank egg beater. The classic Victorian-style beater isn't about strength, it's about gearing and rhythm. You turn a handle and two beaters spin smoothly, whipping air into eggs and batter with far less effort than a fork ever could. And it does it in a controlled, repeatable way, the kind of small efficiency that matters when you're baking often, not once a year. Then comes the tool that proves Victorians were obsessed with waste reduction and speed, the apple parer, corer, and slicer. It clamps to the table, grips the fruit, and as you turn the handle, the apple rotates against a blade and is peeled in a spiral, cored, and sliced with a satisfying inevitability. This is not just cute, it's a time saver that turns pies, preserves, and puddings from a chore into a routine, and that routine is what made home food production scalable. Now, here's a weird one that feels modern because it solves a problem we still have: opening tins. By the mid to late 19th century, can openers became a practical household tool, and you can see the logic immediately. Once preserved foods become common, you need a reliable way to access them without turning dinner into a wrestling match with a knife. And again, it's the Victorian pattern, a simple mechanical interface that reduces risk and increases control. Next, the heavy hitter, the hand crank meat chopper or grinder. This is where the no electricity advantage becomes almost unfair. You clamp it to the counter, feed in meat or cooked ingredients, and the screw mechanism drags it through a cutting pate, controlled, consistent, and strong enough that you're not relying on a motor to do the hard work. It's the same principle you saw with mangles and wringers: leverage, gears, and a design that expects maintenance rather than replacement. Add to that the supporting cast: hand graters that never die, nutmeg grinders, pepper mills, potato rices, simple presses, and you start seeing what the Victorian kitchen really was: not primitive, but engineered for daily throughput. And the best part is that these tools naturally force good technique, steady pace, predictable results, fewer random failures. But here's the twist I want you to notice. None of this is about being old-fashioned. It's about independence. These tools work during a power cut. They work in a tiny kitchen. They work when you're tired. And they don't punish you with complicated parts. Which raises the next question. If Victorians could build a kitchen that efficient without a single socket, what else did they manage to make feel almost luxurious without electricity? Things we think of as modern treats. Because in the next section, we're leaving pure utility for a moment and looking at comfort and pleasure, the hand crank devices they used for coffee, for desserts, and even for making ice cream at home with nothing but ice, salt, and patience.
Now, we're stepping away from pure survival and into something Victorians were secretly brilliant at: making the house feel rich without a single plug socket. Because once you can solve cleaning and laundry with mechanics, you can also build comfort, ritual, and even treats with the exact same mindset. Quick comment before we start. What's your small luxury at home? Coffee? Something sweet? or making things with your hands. Because Victorian domestic tools weren't only about work, they were about turning effort into pleasure. Let's start with the one that still shocks people: ice cream, made at home without electricity. There's a reason the hand-cranked ice cream freezer became such a landmark invention. In the United States, Nancy M. Johnson was granted a patent for an artificial freezer in 1843, essentially a churn-like device that let you freeze a mixture more efficiently by cranking it while it sat inside an ice and salt bath. And just after that, you also see British innovation around ice cream makers in the 1840s too. The science is wonderfully simple. Salt lowers the freezing point of ice, creating a colder, slushy brine around the canister, and the crank keeps the mixture moving so you don't end up with one frozen lump and a watery edge. You get a smoother set. None of this required a grid. It required understanding temperature and motion, and that's the Victorian pattern again. Physics, not electronics. Now pair that with the daily ritual tool that made a home feel civilized: the coffee grinder. In Victorian Britain, robust hand mills became household staples precisely because they were reliable and repairable. The kind that bolt to a table or mount on a wall, turn with a crank, and keep working for decades. Firms like Spong & Co., founded in London in 1856, became known for making solid mechanical kitchen hardware of exactly this type. And then there's the hidden superpower tool that quietly changed domestic life: the treadle sewing machine. A foot-powered machine in a table looks like furniture, but it's actually a productivity engine. You can mend, alter, and produce garments without electricity, using nothing but a belt, a flywheel, and your own rhythm. And Victorian examples like Singer treadle machines were very much part of late 19th century household reality. Finally, the most honest luxury tool of all: the butter churn. Whether you picture a plunger churn or crank style, the principle is the same. Consistent agitation transforms cream into butter and buttermilk, turning something fragile into something stable. And 19th century churn designs were absolutely everyday technology, not museum oddities. Put all of that together and you get the real point of this section. Electricity didn't create comfort, it just hid the mechanics. Victorians built comfort with reliable motion, simple parts, and tools that worked whether the world cooperated or not. Which brings us to the final and most useful part of the video. Out of these 12, which ones are genuinely worth using today? Which are only useful as backups, and which are more trouble than they're worth? Because in the next section, I'll give you the modern takeaway in the simplest possible way.
Right, let's turn this into something you can actually use, because the point of 12 Victorian tools isn't to fill your brain with trivia, it's to give you a practical filter. What still earns a place in a modern home, what's only worth keeping as a backup, and what belongs in a museum unless you genuinely enjoy the process. Quick comment before we close: if you could only keep 3 non-electric tools in your house for a week, what would they be? Because your answer will reveal whether you value speed, reliability, or comfort most. Here's the first bucket: the tools that still make sense today, even if you've got electricity. A good mechanical carpet sleeper for quick, quiet cleanups, a hand crank grinder or chopper for control and consistency, and a treadle-style or hand-powered sewing setup for repairs, because being able to mend something instantly is still a superpower. These are tools that don't fight you, they multiply your effort and reward simple technique. Then there's the second bucket, the backup heroes: washboards, wringers, and heavy irons. They absolutely work, they're historically impressive, and in a pinch they'll get you through, but they're labor, and modern life usually gives you easier options.
If you ever needed them, you'd be grateful, but you wouldn't choose them for fun unless you genuinely like the ritual. And finally, the third bucket, the tools I wouldn't recommend using casually without respect. Anything with strong rollers, pinch points, or heat risks, because Victorian tools were built for a world where people accepted more physical danger in exchange for function. The takeaway is simple. What made these tools powerful wasn't the era, it was the design philosophy. Fewer failure points, clear mechanics, repairable parts, tools that work when conditions aren't perfect. And once you start looking at your home through that lens, you'll notice you can make modern life calmer, cheaper, and less fragile with surprisingly small changes. Not by rejecting technology, but by choosing tools and habits that don't collapse the moment the grid, the battery, or the app lets you down. If you enjoyed this, have a look through the rest of the channel, because we're building a whole library of Victorian how-to knowledge like this. Practical, simple, and actually usable, from keeping homes comfortable to storing everyday food, to the little household methods that still work better than they have any right to.